Hi, welcome to Station 19. We are celebrating some of the talented Latinx storytellers and creators on our show. Introduce yourself and your role on the show.
I'm Henry Robles. I'm co-executive producer and writer.
And I'm Leah Gonzalez, and I'm a staff writer on the show.
I'm Jana Lee Ortiz, and I play Andy Herrera.
I'm Carlos Miranda, and I play Theo Ruiz on Station 19.
Let's get the conversation going. Latinx is not just one thing. Let's talk about how we each identify.
I grew up with Nicaraguan parents, so that's my culture.
I'm second generation Puerto Rican from New York, so that's the flavor. That's what I bring in. What about you?
Culturally, I mean, Mexican is what I feel I am, and I grew up in this country, born in this country. I consume all the same pop culture, and so yes, 100% American and 100% Mexican American.
I also identify like Henry, Mexican American all the way. I also like to identify as Chicana, Latina, you know, it's just different every day. I'm super proud of that, and it's something that I've had to navigate my whole life.
Yeah, like you, I grew up in the city. I soaked up American pop culture and everything as well, so I could be more in tune with my heritage and culture, and it gets a little embarrassing when you don't know certain things.
I'm not an expert on Mexican culture. Like, I can't tell you everything, right? And that's why Henry's in the room. We feed off of each other. Like, we have different knowledge about our upbringings and what we can bring to the room and to the characters.
Yeah, I think what we try to do with Andy and with Theo is to allow them to live in that space, acknowledging their heritage. We want to create fully realized characters. Theo is, like Carlos, Nicaraguan.
Hey, Centro America, all up in SFD.
Nicaraguans rarely get representation as is, you know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of cultures within the Latinx community that doesn't get represented.
But it's changing. There's a lot more representation. There's a lot more acknowledgement of diversity, which is only a good thing.
We all just really have to help each other. And so when a show comes out, we need to support that show. When I came to LA in 2015, I was operating under like, I can't tell my story yet. Then there was this explosion of queer, like Latinx writers coming out in the industry. And I'm like, where were y'all in 2015 when I was like struggling and like the only Latina in like the workplace?
How do you feel that representation matters towards the perception of our culture?
Traditionally, the representation has been very narrow. We're so much more than just one type or even just one culture from one country.
We want to see a Cuban story. We want to see Mexican stories. We want to see Nicaraguan stories.
The more that we see those experiences represented, the more validated we feel and the more people who are not Latino can understand our culture.
My abuela?
Your abuela?
Abuelita, she's 90 years old. We're gonna find her.
In the beginning of my career, I actually tried to hide being Latina. I took my first headshots and I felt like I should look a little more white. I didn't want to be Latina, which was crazy. I was hiding and shoving down my own identity.
The perception of Latinos has really taken a hit because we've been perceived as not American or not American enough.
Yeah, growing up, my dad was very much like, she has to speak English, she has to navigate through the world, like as an American. Some shame came with that, and I had to like unpeel that in my adult life. You know, one thing that I loved when I first started watching Station 19, Andy is Latina, and it didn't have to be explained.
That representation is pretty honest in the sense of like what the world is. The Spanglish is mixed in there, or the conversations about their families and whatnot. We're not trying to like, oh, this is a Latinx person. Like, we know that just because we see it on screen. I like that Theo has a bunch of his mom's recipes. Every time there's some kind of dish, he mentions how like, oh, my mom taught me how to make this.
Pernil is my happy place. It's my mommy's recipe.
Which actually, my mom taught me a few things, you know.
Now we have more and more stories like that where it's like, you don't have to justify having Latina characters.
And I think that's what future generations, I would like them to know that. Know your history, know that Latinos have been in Hollywood from the beginning.
And that's the misconception that I had. Be proud of you in your skin, where you're from, because it doesn't look like one thing.
Our mother, Margarita, used to always tell us, honrar a la familia. Honor them, do right by them, feed them cake.
Yes. This was such an amazing conversation. I had a blast. Thank you again, Henry, Leah,
Pleasure.
Carlos, for sharing your stories and sharing your culture.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.